I'm Bruce Apar, and you're watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Now we can talk, and then up. Talks with Bruce the Blog is brought to you by the Penny Saver and our parent company, Chase Media Group, and we thank our CEO, Carla Chase, as well as our Chief Strategic Officer, Frank J. Rich, for putting us up every week. And the show, if you're new to it, is a community affairs program where we bring you, in each installment, people of interest who are doing things in the community that we feel you want to know about. And maybe you know some of the people on the show, and maybe you know somebody, including yourself, who you think should be on the show as a guest. So you can always contact me at bapar@chasemediagroup.com and just suggest a guest. You can also see the show on YouTube. All you have to do is, on YouTube, search for Town Link. That's one word, Town Link TV, and you'll see all the episodes from the past 2 years come up. Our guest is Dorothy Forcina. Welcome, Dorothy.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you.
And Dorothy, who I've known for many years in various roles and as a neighbor in Yorktown. We're both Yorktown residents. Dorothy is a candidate this year, in this year's election in November, for the town board of the town of Yorktown. And one of the interesting things, of course, Dorothy, is I'm not sure if you know, I'd have to go back. I've been in Yorktown 20 years. You've been in Yorktown 14 years. As long as I've been here, I'm not familiar with a woman being on the town board. Of course, they have been supervisors.
Right.
Linda Cooper and Susan Siegel, and before Linda Cooper, before I moved up here, Nancy Elliott. But as far as a council person, they have been women, but I think it goes back a long way, right?
I think it goes back a long
Yeah.
way, too. I think
Yeah.
people have told me there's been 3, possibly 4 women that have been on the town board in the history of Yorktown. But it's been
In
a
the
while.
history
in
of-
the history of
Oh, wait,
Yorktown.
but that history is what? That's about 200 years
Yeah,
old.
I think it's a long time.
Right. I mean, why do you, I mean, let's take the more recent history. I mean, why do you think that is?
I think people are overwhelmed by the process of running. I think women are great multitaskers by nature, but I think it's just an overwhelming process to think about that I can actually run for town board and try to make a difference.
Right.
I think women in the community are great at volunteerism and don't recognize the fact, but it's a little intimidating to try to make that decision.
Yeah. But what's interesting is, and we'll get into your background, and you have a very rich resume, rich background in the private sector, very impressive. And lately, the last number of years, there's been a lot of talk on the national level of how many women now are CEOs of major, very influential global corporations. I mean, Meg Whitman, who founded eBay and is now the head of Hewlett-Packard, is one of the more prominent ones. The former head of Hewlett-Packard, Carly Fiorina, who ran for governor of California.
I think it was governor.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of examples, and so, although it sounds funny, but in recent years, females have been sort of rising up. The proverbial glass ceiling is starting to get cracked, and there is no limit to how high a woman can go in either corporate America or in politics. Witness Hillary Clinton.
Right, and actually I think the times are changing, and I think people are recognizing the value that women bring to these situations, because we're natural negotiators. We're always negotiating several things and balancing many balls in the air. So I think that people are recognizing those skill sets that women bring to all these different levels.
Right. And now let's talk a little bit about your background, because it's not that common with either of the sexes to find somebody that has the depth of your background in terms of technology, especially. And I know for 20 years you were in IT.
Yes. 20 years I worked for a firm on Wall Street. It was Quick & Riley, which was a discount brokerage firm at the early onset
Right.
And I worked there for 20 years, even through the acquisition of Fleet Bank acquiring it. It was during the mergers and acquisitions of banks into brokerage firms.
Right.
And during my tenure there, I ended my tenure as the Chief Technology Officer for what they called the non-bank related infrastructure. So I ran everything from the help desk through level 1, level 2, level 3 support through architecture and engineering. And I was fortunate because when I first started at Quick and Riley, I was an operations clerk and went to college at night.
Wow.
I went to college at night, my degree in computer science back in the early 90s, which was a little unusual back then.
Right. And I guess that gave you a good grounding in helping people, right? I mean, you say you worked on the help desk, I mean, literally helping people, and which of course is what, especially a town level elected official, really gets close up to the constituents.
Right.
And it's really much more of a one-on-one relationship than you would find at higher levels of government.
Right.
Right. And so that's something that you feel comfortable with and that you want to continue to do in the public sector.
Absolutely.
Right?
And one of the most rewarding parts of my career, even at Quick and Riley, Fleet Securities, which is now Bank of America, is I still have people to this day who viewed me as a mentor, who will still call me for advice, ask me for guidance, and ask, just kind of, pick my brain and, talk. So I find that really very rewarding, even though I haven't been on Wall Street for the last, 10 years or so. So I like the one-on-one interaction. And that's when I left Wall Street. That was one of the things I made a strategic decision to do, is getting involved more in the community for that reason.
Right. And so was there any, as they call it, aha moment that induced you to now decide to run for public office? I mean, how long have you been thinking about it?
I've been thinking about it for a few years. My prior role, after I left Wall Street and I went to work for the Westchester County Association,
right.
I got a really good overview about what happens in local politics, how business and local politics can work, and I really got a taste for it. But while I worked for the County Association, even though I got to learn a lot, I was also a registered lobbyist, which precluded me from really pursuing anything having to do with an elected office. When I left, and there's a lot of my volunteerism terms that are winding down, my family and I sat down and we said, maybe this is the right time to try it. Before I kind of get the lap of luxury and not have to do all my volunteerism. There's several things that are culminating this year, and I said, what, this is the right time.
Now, you're saying you were a registered lobbyist with?
With the Westchester County Association.
And so as a registered lobbyist, you cannot run for office, is that?
Correct. And
right?
I also felt that people could perceive it as a conflict of interest, and I didn't want any perception in any form. I didn't want people to think that if I was speaking on my own that I was representing the organization I worked for. So I just didn't feel it was appropriate. And I really don't want to mix things together that don't really have any business being mixed. And I feel that that wasn't the right time.
Yeah. And that's, by the way, that's an interesting point you make when you say that you didn't want people to think, if you were running for office, that your views, your ideologies necessarily represented your employer.
Right.
And the reason I point that out is because there will be times, we've all seen it, where somebody will make a statement and they're with a company, or maybe they have a very high profile, in the public sector, and then they'll make a statement and they'll say, I am not saying this as so-and-so. And I've always said, well, that's nonsense, because it doesn't matter that you say that, it's what people perceive you to be.
Correct. And
so if they know that you have a certain role,
right,
and you're saying this, they're going to put the two together no matter how much you deny it or
right,
try to qualify it. And so I think that was a very wise and admirable decision. But I'm just curious. So when a lobbyist is registered, who are you registered with?
New York State. New York State. You're registered with New York State because anytime you would go to Albany to discuss any policies or possible change in legislation. So, for example, when we went to Albany representing the business community to discuss the MTA payroll tax,
yes,
that was perceived as trying to change legislation. So you're registered with the state. You report to the state on a quarterly basis how many hours you spend in Albany or anything having to do with possible legislation changes, and then you report the percentage of your overall hours on an annual basis. So they determine whether you've exceeded what they determine is allowable time.
Okay.
So we went up to Albany when New York State wanted to pass the sugar tax.
Right.
And we went with representatives on, why would you do this, to Pepsi being one of the largest employers.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you balance out the fact that the organization you're representing is protected, and the best way to do that is to make sure that you are above board and transparent in any of the dealings that you have.
Right. And so you did that because you were with Westchester County Association at the time, and that was part of your job description?
It was part of my job description.
Right.
We had a very active committee called the Call to Action,
right,
which really worked on non-business friendly legislation coming out of Albany or the county
Right.
that we felt was going to be detrimental to the local economy.
Right.
So that's part of what my role was at the county association.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as I'm sure you've noticed yourself, being a former Westchester County Association staff person, that both the Westchester County Association and the Business Council of Westchester, it seems to me, and I've been following them for at least the last 7 or 8 years from when I was at North County News as the publisher, that they're getting recently much more political than they ever were. They seem to be sort of raising the stakes in terms of the activism and the programs that they sponsor. Basically taking a very firm stand on, well, certainly pro-business issues and anti-tax issues.
Right.
And really getting in there, getting in the mix and, doing everything they can to influence outcomes.
Well, I think recent years was, it really, I think the business community felt that in the last 20 years, they really took a back step.
Yeah.
And thought that everything was going to go along just as it had. And I think when some of these onerous taxes started coming down, just things that didn't make sense and requirements, it was causing businesses to spend more time trying to figure out how to make up those differences on new taxes, new penalties, things coming down, that it was almost impossible for the small business person to really continue on. So that's where we heard the outcry. So when we get political, we're not picking sides.
Right.
We're just picking issues that we feel are going to be important for business to continue to sustain growth in New York State and in Westchester.
Right. Which is what your members expect. Well, the Westchester County Association members or business council members expect them to do is to operate in the best interests of the business members. And speaking of government being perceived as anti-business, people in and around Yorktown know that that's been the rap on the town of Yorktown up until the incumbent supervisor, Michael Grace, was elected. And in the last 18 months, he's done a tremendous amount to turn around, not only turn around the perception, but the reality, which is to facilitate and to help businesses because it helps the local economy. And helping the local economy helps taxpayers. So what are some of the things that you see that you would like to influence if you are elected to the Yorktown Town Board? Some of the things that are happening that maybe you feel you'd like to change or things you'd like to introduce that aren't happening.
Well, back to your first point, though, about Michael Grace bringing in business.
Yeah.
One of the things that's a measurable thing that people don't really get the understanding is that when local commercial properties don't have tenants, they're allowed to go and file what they call a tax certiorari, which then basically lets them have reduce their taxes because they have no rentable income coming in.
Or get reimbursed.
Or get reimbursed.
For
so what's
taxes,
happened in the past few years, and people don't recognize this, that towns and especially school districts have to accrue for these tax certiorari's that are pending in court, which could take years. And even in our local taxes, I can
So you mean they have to put a reserve?
They have to put a reserve.
Right.
So I was even speaking with the Yorktown School District and looking at how they had a reserve. Their reserves over the 2 years prior had gone up to almost $700,000 to $1 million that they had to put in reserves just for pending tax certiorari's from commercial properties that were empty. And in this year's tax budget, they were able to reduce that down to a couple of $100,000 again, which is where it had always been because there's less vacant space.
Right.
And that's important to understand, that vacant space doesn't necessarily be a good thing because it's not the fact that people just can't go to shop there. It also impacts your taxes because of the fact you have to reserve for when these cases are settled that could take up to 9 or 10 years.
Right.
So this is an important aspect that I think Michael Grace has really made a difference on, is bringing in people into storefronts. People that I speak to and then I'm involved with the community, they want to shop in Yorktown.
Yeah,
they want to be in Yorktown.
Right.
They want to be able to do stuff in Yorktown. So I think the moves we're making, I think that they're in the right direction. And I think that some of these things that we could possibly do to make Yorktown a destination is something of interest, where people want, the new term out there now is called placemaking. People want places to go, and they don't want it just to be one thing to do. They want, there's like a number of 10. That 10 things in a community makes it a place and a destination that people want to go. And it's all part of sustainable development.
Right.
When you have sustainable development, you're actually reducing your carbon footprint by driving everywhere. And if you could actually walk to a lot of places, where a lot of parts of downtown Yorktown you can, if you had a lot of things to do. And I think that's what Michael is bringing, and I hope to bring that kind of viewpoint and perspective to the town board.
Yeah, no, I think that would, that would be great. And speaking of schools, you've been very involved as well in the school district. It happens to be Yorktown, but the show goes all over northern Westchester, and it could be in any community. it's important that there are people in every community, like yourself, who step up. And you were the president of the PTSA,
this current year I was right. I'm the
right.
current president of the high school PTSA in Yorktown, because that's
Right.
where my school district is. And what you do is you serve for one term as a president-elect, which was last term.
Right.
And this year I've been the president. So my term here ends June 30th at the end of the school year. So
Right.
that's been great and really rewarding to understand about the high school.
Right.
Prior to that, I served for 9 years in different capacities on the Foundation for Excellence in Yorktown Education,
Right.
which is a group that works on raising funds for teachers' unique ideas on
Right.
how to bring new programs into the school district that we fund through private donations and through fundraising.
Right, because they aren't budgeted. They aren't
They're
in
not
the
budgeted
district
'cause-
budget. Right.
Right, because these are ideas that are out of the box.
Yeah.
So if you go back to one of the earliest grants that the Foundation for Excellence granted was our science research program in the high school now, which is
Right.
funded through the district.
Yes.
But in the beginning, it was an idea.
Right.
And the teacher had an idea, he brought it to us, it was something worth funding, and now it's taken off that it's been so successful.
Yes, I know
We have
that.
one of the most successful science research programs in the county,
Right,
but
right.
it started with an idea.
Yeah.
Another one we funded was the Sustainable Gardens at French Hill,
Right,
where
yes.
it was teaching kids about the edible garden, bringing things from farm to table, but it was also giving them skills about how to market it, how to, marketing and science and social studies. So it was bringing all these different aspects together that we were able to fund that. And then when they closed French Hill, the Foundation for Excellence helped found it at Compound.
Right.
So
Moved
it's
it
these
over,
kinds
yeah.
of unique ideas that teachers bring to the table, and you need innovation.
Right. And as you're saying, I mean, I know that a lot of students in Yorktown qualify for the Intel, right, awards, and of course they always do very well Destination Imagination.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's a great example of the cause and effect of helping to supplement public monies with private funding.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what that is, yeah.
And once you find out that the idea works and it's like an incubator, then it becomes part of the overall budget.
Right. And there has been a lot of talk, again, not only in Yorktown, about the concept of public-private partnerships. Government, again, going back to the government's role in helping businesses, that there's been some incidents, as we know, in Yorktown regarding the winery, which is sort of a cause célèbre for the business community in Yorktown. And there's also a lot of discussion about open space. And just a couple of minutes ago, you were talking about empty storefronts. And one of the things that, that I comment on is that, that's open space that we really should be concerned about,
Right.
is the open space that is an empty storefront. Right? But my question is, what are your thoughts on open space? I mean, I know there are very militant open space people who don't seem to have much tolerance for business development, because every time it comes up as a subject, they oppose it, right? And so I guess the question there is, where is the balance?
Well, I think that's part of the negotiation you have to do, because I think one of the unique aspects of Yorktown is the open space that we have.
Right.
But it's leveraging how do we utilize that open space and make development not enemies. Business is not a bad word.
Right,
But for example,
right.
I think about all the beautiful farms we have up here. Let's go to Hilltop Hanover.
Yeah.
Why
yeah.
can't Hilltop Hanover then somehow partner with and have a nice upscale restaurant, and you really can demonstrate farm to table?
Yeah, that's a
You know
good
what I mean?
point.
We
That's a
have
good
a
idea.
lot of
Yeah.
natural resources, and it's a way to figure out how to tie those natural resources and the beauty of Yorktown into things that we would bring to table that would partner with each other,
Right.
and benefit each other, as opposed to, I don't look at them as going in two opposite directions. I think there's ways we can bring them
Right.
together, where we could take the walking trails.
Yes.
How can we take the walking trails and bring in the fact of businesses to support that?
Right.
If we're going to have a very active, vibrant walking community, well, there's lots of businesses that may want to support that. So I think we have to look at, we're not talking about building strip malls.
Right. No.
We're
no,
talking
that's
about
right.
the fact of leveraging our natural beauty, the things we have to offer, and enhancing them. And
Right,
I think,
right.
Look at the Rockefeller estate when they have stone barns. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get a stone barns, but it's a way that they took the natural beauty of that area and they leverage it with a destination.
Right.
So I
That's
think that
right,
there's things
yeah.
that we can do to marry the two better and not look at each other as being adversarial.
And in Yorktown, there's a restaurant, a very historic restaurant, Peter Pratt's, that is known for its farm to table.
Right.
And of course, Jonathan Pratt is a very strong advocate of things like biofuel and,
Yeah.
and things like that, and farm to table. So there's already a precedence there. For
And we
that.
should take his ideas and expand upon them, and
Yeah.
not make them only one. You know, we have such an opportunity because we have such unique historic homes.
Yeah.
We have
Yes.
such unique history. How do we tie all these things together? Not forget the past, but not be stuck that we don't know how to carry it into the future, because there's plenty of places you can have just one thing, but if you don't grow, it becomes stagnant.
Right, and it's very pertinent to note at this juncture that Yorktown's motto is progress with preservation. Right.
Okay, you're correct.
Right, and so I guess if there's a certain dichotomy there in terms of the politics and the ideology, it may be that some of the people who are understandably very adamant about the preservation part, it becomes a question: is what is their definition of progress? Right. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
And it's dialogue,
yeah.
and I
Right.
think that dialogue
Right.
has to stop, as opposed to people thinking that they're against.
Right.
That everybody's butting heads.
Right.
And I think that I don't think anybody wants to take down all the natural beauty and build
No, of course not.
build strip malls.
Right.
But I think there's a balance that has to happen. And with the community up here, do you really want everybody driving all over the place, which probably creates more
Right.
traffic and CO2 emissions than having people be able to walk and having, the downtown area needs a little bit of help. And we have
Yes.
the beautiful Yorktown stage. We've got some interesting places, and we have a lot of empty storefronts. How can we make that whole Kmart shopping center a destination and tying it into the Yorktown stage, which
Right.
is an asset that people throughout Westchester talk about? Oh, I know the Yorktown stage, but
Right.
you want them to come, and you want them to do something else after that.
Right. And again, acknowledging people who are very, as I said, adamant about open space, sometimes to the extent of not wanting one blade of grass to be touched, that we all would like to maintain a certain small town ambience or quality of life. And so, like you say, it's a matter of marrying that to contemporary needs and,
Right.
and not always having to go to Danbury or other places to do
Right.
all of your shopping. It's that type of thing. Now, Dorothy, this is your first foray into public
Yes.
life, so to speak. Although you're a very hardworking volunteer, which is also public life. But in terms of elected office, do you have further ambitions beyond a town level
No.
role, or no?
No, my goal really is I really enjoy living in Yorktown. I want people to be able to say, I'm not going to have to leave right after my child graduates high school.
Right.
You create roots in a community. And what I find has been a shame is how many people of my age that have kids that are finishing high school are like, I can't afford to live here anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't want it to lose its small town feeling. What I love about even where I go to church is the fact that people have been here multiple generations. And I think it's really cool to hear what happened here 50, 60 years ago. I've brought in people into my Girl Scout troops to talk about what happened here so they can learn where they came from.
Yeah.
But I hate the fact that people may decide that I can't afford to live here anymore, so we have to go someplace else. I want people to want to be here.
Right.
And I don't have any other desires to go into higher elected role. I have a full-time job. I work at Mercy College.
Oh, that's right. We should mention that you're in charge of corporate partnerships.
Yeah, I'm
isn't that
director
what-
of corporate
right,
partnerships,
right.
and my role there is to work with the business community that have these talent retention programs, because one of the things we suffer in Westchester is youth flight, where many young people between 25 and 35 leave the county for many reasons, and these companies struggle, and a lot of them are put in talent retention programs, and part of that could be part of their tuition reimbursement about how can employees go back to school to further their education and attain a higher degree.
Oh.
So that's one of the aspects of it, and to work with them to let them understand the different aspects that Mercy brings to the community, whether it be Dobbs Ferry is the main campus, but it also has a Yorktown campus that we want to be able
Right.
to bring back and revitalize again.
So it's like it could be like a form of adult education or mid-career,
Right.
education and things like that.
And things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, I know, like in some cases, many nurses have to go back to school nowadays to get their
Right.
BS, their Bachelor of Science in Nursing that they didn't need years ago. So it's all those kinds of aspects that Mercy brings to the table, and it's a local college in Dobbs Ferry that,
Right.
in all honesty, I didn't even know they had a Yorktown campus until I started working there.
Right on,
because
yeah.
it's one of those things. It's one of those hidden assets that you don't even think about when you pass by it all the time.
Right. And it's interesting, by the way, when you mentioned talent retention. It used to be, in my former life, I was involved in the movie business on the publishing side. And so when you hear talent, usually you think of show business and
Okay.
movies and theater. But now what I've noticed in terms of the changing workplace culture, and business culture in general, is even human resources, the words, human resources are being replaced in many companies by talent acquisition.
Yes.
The person in charge of hiring, the title now is talent acquisition, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but actually I think it's a nice acknowledgement of, you want to hire people with talent. It doesn't mean that they sing or dance or act. It means that they have very specific skills that your business needs, and so that's talent too.
That's talent also, absolutely. Yeah. It's a different way of looking at things, and it's not just traditionally, HR personnel manager. It's really looking for the best of the best. And then when you get those employees, how do you keep them? Right.
And that's, that's something that is often overlooked. Like you said, is, the acquisition we all know about, it's called hiring. But the retention is something that a lot of companies don't think too much about, do they? Or necessarily even invest in terms of on-the-job training. Right,
and a lot of that got cut out, and a lot of that, during times
the recession,
and everything. But I think companies have that challenge to try to keep the best, and I think that's one of the things that, organizations like Mercy try to help say, like, we're here as a resource to you to help you with these kinds of things.
Right.
So, no, it's a really exciting role. I'm very excited to be there. I think today is finishing my 5th month.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So time flies, but it's been great, and it's really great learning about higher education. So it's interesting. I've gone from the for-profit sector, then I've gone to working for a nonprofit organization, which is a business organization, to higher education. So now I'm entering into government. So I think I cover all the kind of main verticals, if you think about it.
Right. No, which also gives you arguably an unusually well-rounded resume. That's still very active.
Right.
In all of the disciplines that should play into being a successful citizen legislator, which we were talking about before. And let's touch on that just for a second, because we only have a couple of minutes left. And that is, in recent years, on all levels of government, from the national, the federal level, down to the town or city level, it's fair to say there's been a certain consensus among the electorate that repudiates, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, career politicians who are voted out of office in favor of what our history, and constitutionally, were called citizen legislators, people who maybe left their job, or in addition to doing their job, also became elected officials, but with the clear intent of doing that for a very short period of time, and not expecting that the rest of your income for the rest of your life would come from politics, which can be very unhealthy, to say the least.
Yeah. And I'm a believer in that. And I mentioned earlier that through the county association, I was really exposed to a lot, but one of the people had recommended a book called Leadocracy.
Yes.
And Leadocracy was a book written by, I think his name was Jeff Smart, and that really kind of transferred that people need to get involved in their politics, whether it be local, and citizen legislators, and being a business person, you have a lot to bring to the table.
Right, exactly. Anyhow, it's been really fascinating, Dorothy. Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Leading up to November. And we've been talking with Dorothy Forcina of Yorktown, and also of Mercy College, who is a candidate for the Town of Yorktown Town Board. Thank you for watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk. Thank you. Goes by very fast.